All right, hello, welcome to the A4 presentation by Crafty Crew. Next slide. So aging populations and those with physical disabilities are the most likely to have unequal access to transportation in their day-to-day life. Despite improvements with things like ADA, new mobility technologies like e-scooters, things are actually getting worse for these groups. This is an important issue with an aging population worldwide. Our statistics in A3 show that 3 out of every 20 people in the world have some form of disability. That is a group of over 1 billion people, many of which are getting older, with over half of those that are over 60 in 2030 being classed as disabled. Thus, our mission statement is that we aim to assist disadvantaged people navigate unfamiliar areas by giving prior knowledge of the terrain, landmarks, and other information that updates in real time. Next slide.
So based on A3, our primary persona was Jane Doe, who is elderly and physically disabled. However, she needs to travel for work and uses public transport. She understands the physical area around her, but is not as technologically understanding as a younger individual. In relation to how we designed for that, we ensured that the content of the app was accessible and compliant with standards that made the app usable for anyone, regardless of their past experience with technology. Our secondary persona, John Doe, is a younger college-age student with the similar physical disability and has a less obvious physical disability, so less resources are provided to him. And he has the same necessity to travel and uses public transport the same. In contrast, he has a good technological understanding, but does not understand the physical area around him. So we designed for this by ensuring that information directly benefits the user to make decisions regarding how they navigate the world, regardless of how familiar they are to their specific geographic location.
For a prototype, we wanted to make sure that we included these 3 core features. One being accessibility options to accommodate the user's needs right away for a better user experience. The second core feature is having the feedback system through a community feed, a feed that gathers reliable travel information with live updates and warnings from recent visitors. And this could all help users avoid hazards or any obstacles that could block them from getting to their destination. And the last one is obvious, but the route finding feature that suggests routes based on the accessibility settings. Next slide, please. And before we started working off Figma, we wanted to sketch a few main pages that we wanted to include in the prototype. One being a display of the bus pass and the DSA view pass, along with alerts that are nearby and blocking any routes. And on the right, you see how we broke down each page.
So our initial wireframes, basically in this section of screens, we wanted to lay out the function of each screen. And we wanted to incorporate some crowdsourcing while also creating icons that were relevant to our product. After we got feedback from our users, there was a lot of complaints about icons being not clear enough. So we decided to prioritize a more clear system for conveying our information.
So our initial mood board was focusing on trying to convey the ideas and feelings of our users and what they actually need. So one key thing for us was this idea of facilitation. So it's where we provide the means for the people with physical disabilities or people that are elderly to have equal access to transport and do things themselves. Rather than kind of providing them a hand-holding assistance, we're providing them with an equal access that kind of removes that feeling of disability at all. And you see that reflected in the images that we chose and some of the things like that. Next slide. So from here, we kind of decided to refine this, and we started to pull out interesting colors. And what we did was we tried to find colors that were kind of complementary or tetradic and things like that. And the refinement was just kind of cutting out some of these ideas that were loosely associated and focusing on, again, this idea of facilitation and providing a means for people to do something. Next slide. This is the start of the style guide, and we've realized that if we're going to make an accessible application, we have to derive colors from the ones we pull from the MoodBoard and edit them to meet WCAG compliance, 3:1 for large text and for components. The green, however, does not meet the compliance with a white background. That's just for illustrative purposes. Next slide. So we again expanded the style guide with components and all the different states that we'd need to create an interactive prototype. In the center, we have all of the various templates, and the way that we designed that was so that we had a hi-fi template base that we could then iterate content on very quickly. This allowed us to kind of be more fluid and make changes after that we interviewed participants. And then finally, we have our grid on the right. Next slide.
As you can see, these are our lo-fi prototypes. The first page, you could see that we included favorite routes and saved settings, along with explore pages. That takes you directly to the community feed. And you could see right here that there's an alert message alerting the user about a route that seems to be crowded.
So here, after we had this kind of initial hi-fi and lo-fi, what we wanted to do was we kind of created a lot of different things in terms of a user flow, but it wasn't very coherent. It was very hard for our users to really understand where they needed to go and what they needed to do to complete a specific task. And so what we did was we created a user information architecture, and then we refined our existing lo-fi into something to have more structure and kind of coherent flows for each of the tasks. Next slide.
So based on our user feedback, the things we needed to do were improving the efficiency of users going through the flow. So for example, things like the settings page and harder to reach pages, ensuring that the prototype is compliant with standards for accessibility. For example, the taskbars and the different components. And we needed to further visually refine repeated elements to make them consistent across the different screens. So for example, changing the blue to navy blue in order to make things more visually contrasting, but visually appealing at the same time.
And finally, we improved on all the features that we set out to do from our lo-fi. We added an alert system. We added a crowdsourcing bulletin board where other users can comment, and there are threads where they can upvote or downvote solutions. And we had a neat little pinch and drop feature for the users who didn't want to create a post that they could just pinch and drop an icon in. We also, that other users can see. We also wanted to incorporate tags to help filter the information and make it easier for the user to navigate. Next slide. And these are just some examples of some screens from our high fidelity. And thank you for listening to our presentation.